Welcome back to Screen Rated. Today we're talking about something that I think every single one of us has experienced at least once. That moment where you're sitting there watching a movie or a TV show, and something happens that makes you want to throw your remote across the room. Even though you knew it was coming. Maybe you read the book and knew the myth. Or when you saw the trailer, you just put two and two together. But it doesn't matter. When the moment hits, it hits hard. And you're devastated all over again like you didn't see it coming from a mile away. These are the 5 worst scenes from movies and TV shows that pissed us off. Even broke some of us, even though we knew exactly what was going to happen. And as always, massive spoiler warning for everything we're about to discuss. Number 5, Achilles' death from Troy. The story of the Trojan War is one of the most well-known tales in all of human history. Homer's The Iliad has been required reading in schools for generations. So when Wolfgang Petersen's Troy hit theaters in 2004, we weren't exactly walking in blind. We knew how this story ended. But knowing something and seeing it are two completely different things. Because what made it sting, what really got under people's skin, wasn't just the death itself. It was who delivered it. Prince Paris. The man who started the entire war by running off with another man's wife. The same man who, in one of the most embarrassing moments in all of cinema, challenged King Menelaus to a one-on-one duel to settle the conflict. And then, when Menelaus started winning, literally crawled on his hands and knees to hide behind his brother Hector. This guy, Prince Paris. This guy is the one who gets to be the one who brings down the greatest warrior in history. And here's the kicker. Hector was the honorable one. Hector was the noble warrior who fought for his family and people, yet was killed by Achilles in a grief-fueled rage. But Paris gets to survive and shoot the fatal arrow? It was infuriating. Not because it was a twist, but because Greek mythology had the audacity to be that cruel, and the filmmakers had the audacity to make you feel every bit of it. The legend of Achilles is so powerful because he was essentially superhuman, nearly invulnerable, and in the end, he wasn't brought down by a worthy opponent in glorious combat. He was taken out by a coward with a lucky shot. Number 4, Glenn's death from The Walking Dead. This one was heartbreaking. If you watched The Walking Dead, Glenn was arguably the heart of the entire show. We're talking about a guy who, from the very first episode, was the voice on the other end of the radio that saved Rick when he was trapped inside a tank in the middle of zombie-infested Atlanta. A pizza delivery guy from before the apocalypse who somehow became one of the most capable, most decent human beings in a world that had completely stopped rewarding decency. He was kind when kindness was dangerous. He was optimistic when optimism seemed delusional. And he found real love with Maggie. He was the guy you rooted for because he was the guy who still believed in something. Now, if you read Robert Kirkman's graphic novel that the show was based on, you knew Negan and his barbed wire bat Lucille were coming, and fans of the comics had been dreading it for years before the show got there. The showrunners even played games with us in Season 6, faking Glenn's death in that dumpster scene, which in hindsight felt a little cruel, like they were getting you comfortable, making you think they changed it. In Season 7, Episode 1, Negan lines everyone up, and when Lucille finally comes down, it's on Glenn. The camera doesn't look away. The show let us experience every brutally graphic moment of Glenn's demise. Millions of viewers were angry. Not surprised, just angry. Because there's something uniquely devastating about watching someone as genuinely good as Glenn meet an end that violent. It felt almost like a punishment for being decent in a world that had no use for decency anymore. And here's what's really fascinating. After that episode, the ratings for The Walking Dead began to decline and never recovered. Millions of viewers tuned out because losing Glenn broke something. He was the reason a lot of people kept watching, and without him, the show lost its emotional center. The death everyone saw coming ended up being the beginning of the end for one of the biggest shows on television. Number 3, Ned Stark's execution, Game of Thrones. This moment rewrote the rules of television. Before Game of Thrones, there was an unspoken contract between storytellers and audiences. An agreement that had been honored for decades across fantasy, adventure, and drama alike. The honorable man survives. They don't get their head cut off in Episode 9 of Season 1. Ned Stark was that man. Sean Bean played him with this unshakable dignity. Lord of Winterfell and the Warden of the North. A man who rode into King's Landing with nothing but his integrity and his belief that if you told the truth, if you did the right thing, if you trusted in justice, then the system would protect you because the world was fundamentally ordered in a way that rewarded decency. And the show let you believe that. It let you settle in. It gave you 8 episodes of Ned being Ned and refusing to never playing the game everyone around him was clearly playing. But here's the thing that makes this entry so fascinating on this list. The show was never actually hiding what it was doing. It was warning you the entire damn time. Ned is surrounded by liars from the moment he arrives in the capital. Littlefinger tells him point blank not to trust him. Cersei tells him that in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. The evidence was stacking up episode after episode that this world, this specific brutal world, does not reward the kind of man Ned Stark is. It punishes him. But we didn't listen. Because we'd been trained not to. Decades of storytelling had conditioned us to trust that a man like Ned Stark was the protagonist, and protagonists don't die in the first season. They survive long enough to set things right. Then Joffrey changes his mind. And the sword falls. And the internet quite literally broke. People new to the world of Westeros were inconsolable. Even some who had read the book and knew it was coming reported feeling a kind of visceral shock watching it play out on screen with Sean Bean's performance, making it all too real. The outrage wasn't really about surprise, though. It was about something deeper. It was about realizing that the show had been completely honest with us the whole time, and we just hadn't wanted to believe it. Ned's death isn't a plot twist. It's the show standing up and telling us directly, this is what kind of story this is. Honor and mercy are weaknesses that will be exploited because the game doesn't care about our values. Everything that follows in Game of Thrones, every betrayal and brutal death, every moment where the character you were rooting for gets cut down or turned into a genocidal maniac flows directly from that chopping block in the September of Baelor. Ned Stark dying with his integrity intact is both the most heartbreaking and the most narratively important moment in the entire series. Number 2, Boromir's death. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. Sean Bean has died on screen so many times that the moment he appears in a project, we start the countdown. It's a running joke at this point. Here's what makes Boromir's death genuinely painful and infuriating. It's who he turns out to be in the moment before his death. Because for most of the film, Boromir is the guy we're not quite sure about. He's the one who argued against going to Mordor in the first place. He's the one whose eyes linger on the ring a beat too long. He's the one who carries this barely concealed desperation because he knows his city is dying and he genuinely believes that the ring could save it. The movie do a precise job of keeping us at arm's length from Boromir. We don't distrust him completely, but we watch him. We keep one eye on him. We're waiting for the moment he breaks. And he does break. Adamon Hen, he corners Frodo and tries to take the ring by force. The thing we were worried about the whole movie happens. Frodo escapes by putting the ring on, and Boromir is left standing there, suddenly horrified by what he just did. You can see the exact moment the fog lifts, and he realizes what he's become. Then the Uruk-hai attack, and everything changes. Boromir doesn't retreat. When Merry and Pippin are in danger, he charges in like a man who has decided, in that single moment, that the rest of his life belongs to something worthy. He blows the horn of Gondor. He fights through wave after wave. And then the first arrow hits. By the time Lurtz puts the third arrow into him, Boromir is running on something that isn't physical anymore. When Aragorn finally reaches him and kneels beside him, what follows is one of the most devastating scenes in the entire trilogy. Boromir looks up and says, "My brother, my captain, my king." And then he's gone. Audiences were wrecked. Not just sad, genuinely angry, the way you get angry when something feels unfair. Because Boromir spent the entire film being the character we quietly judged, the one we kept at a distance, the one we were ready to blame when things went wrong. And then in the space of about 10 minutes, he turned into arguably the bravest member of the entire Fellowship. That's what made it hurt so much. The story waited until the absolute last moment to show us who Boromir really was underneath all that desperation and pride, and then it took him away before you could even fully process it. We didn't just grieve Boromir. We grieved the version of him we never got to know for long enough. The man he was becoming in those final minutes, full of arrows and still swinging, was someone we would have followed anywhere. And the film only lets us have him for about 2 minutes before it's over. Number 1, The Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, Season 3, Episode 9. Book readers tried to warn people. They really did. In the years between George R.R. Martin publishing A Storm of Swords and the show finally reaching that chapter, fans of the novels developed this reputation for showing up in comment sections and forums with a kind of ominous, tight-lipped expression whenever someone mentioned Robb Stark's campaign. They weren't spoiling anything. They were just watching and waiting because they knew. And when Season 3 started airing and non-readers were excitedly talking about Robb's momentum, book readers would just nod quietly and say things like, "Keep watching," and "I'm so sorry." Here is the specific genius and specific cruelty of The Red Wedding. It works by exploiting the relationship between us and the story that the show had spent 3 seasons deliberately building. Think about what Game of Thrones had already done by this point. Ned Stark's death at the end of Season 1 was the show's opening statement. It told us clearly and loudly, this world does not protect the honorable. This world does not follow the rules we think it follows. That lesson was learned. And then, and this is the move that is almost architectural in its brilliance, the show gave us Robb Stark. Young, fierce, undefeated in battle. He was the king in the north. He had his father's honor, but also his father's stubbornness. And the show let us watch him build something that looked, episode after episode, like the foundation of a triumphant arc. He was winning. He had a queen he loved, a child on the way, and an army that believed in him. Narrative momentum was on his side, and every storytelling instinct we had that was built from a lifetime of consuming fiction said that a character like this was being set up for something. Most of us were right, just not the something we were expecting. When the Stark party arrives at the twins for the wedding feast, the show does something almost unbearably precise. It lets you relax. The tension of the journey dissolves into music and food and toasts. Robb and Talisa share a quiet moment. There's warmth and relief. Then doors close. And then the music changes. If you were a book reader, The Rains of Castamere beginning to play was the moment your stomach dropped through the floor. Because you knew what that song meant. You knew what Frey hospitality was about to become. You sat there watching the faces of first-time viewers still smiling, still comfortable, knowing what was about to happen. Then the crossbows come out from behind the curtains. What follows is systematically shocking. The show doesn't just kill Robb, it dismantles everything around him first. Talisa, his pregnant wife, stabbed repeatedly in the stomach. His direwolf killed in the kennels. His bannermen cut down in the courtyard. Catelyn, screaming, bargaining, a knife to Frey's wife's throat, making one last desperate play for her son's life the way she had spent the entire series making desperate plays for her children. And Robb, crawling toward Talisa, already dying, unable to process what is happening fast enough to do anything about it. The reaction was unlike almost anything television had produced before. But here's what separates the Red Wedding from a standard shocking death, and why it belongs at the top of this list. The anger wasn't really about being surprised. The anger was about feeling personally betrayed by a story that we had trusted. Game of Thrones had taught its audience to be smarter. Ned Stark dying meant we should have learned to stop assuming the honorable character was safe. We thought we'd had figured out the game, and stopped expecting traditional narrative protection. We thought we're watching with clear eyes. And the show looked at all of our hard-won wisdom and the careful emotional distance we had tried to maintain, and it walked straight through it. Because the Red Wedding doesn't kill a character we were nervously protecting ourselves from caring about. It kills the character many of us had allowed ourselves to believe in again. The one whose momentum felt real. The one whose story felt like it was going somewhere. That was the intent. The show needed us to care about Robb completely, and without reservation for the moment to work. So it spent 2.5 seasons making sure we did. It gave us his victories and his love story and his grief over his father and his complicated relationship with honor. And then it used every single bit of that investment as the mechanism of our devastation. Book readers tried to warn us because they had been through it themselves, and they knew there was no preparing for it. Martin had pulled the same move on an entire generation of readers years earlier. The show followed the blueprint with surgical faithfulness. The Red Wedding killed a certain kind of hope, the hope that caring about someone in a story means the story will protect them. That narrative momentum is armor. That a rising arc has to resolve in triumph. It doesn't. It never did. The show had been honest about that since Ned Stark's head hit the ground. It made us furious because we forgot. Because the show made us forget on purpose. And that's why the Red Wedding remains the single most viscerally upsetting scene in a series full of upsetting scenes. Because of how deliberately it made us feel it. And that's our list. Look, the reason these scenes hit us so hard, even when we see them coming, because when a story is told well enough, you can know exactly where it's going and still be completely destroyed when it gets there. Let me know in the comments which scene on this list hit you the hardest, and tell me what scenes you think should have made the cut that we missed. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to Screen Rated if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.